Well, hi everybody. My name is Josh Hickman, as you noted, and I'm the Tidelands Program Manager at the City of Long Beach, so housed in the Public Works Department. So we do have some updates. We're going to give you some of the background if you haven't been quite filled in yet as to where the study is, and then we'll move into some of the technical studies that have been underway over the last year, and then we'll focus on the next steps. So here. So study goals and objectives. It's important just to frame the conversation in the context of the goals and objectives. So I'll read through these. The goal is to restore and improve aquatic ecosystem structure and function for increased habitat biodiversity and ecosystem value within the project area. So it's a little bit lengthy there, but basically it's ecosystem restoration, right? And then the objective is to restore the aquatic habitat. So it includes a lot of those habitat types that you saw on the previous slide. So there are some constraints and considerations, which Seamus had alluded to, and we received a couple comments on. So we want to go through some of these, because these are important to frame the context of the study as a whole. So we can't reduce the maritime operational capacity for the port. So this goes to the gentleman's comment there. This includes the U.S. Navy, the Tums Energy Islands as well. We also want to minimize the impacts to known major utilities, navigation channels, and anchorages. Avoid any increase in shoreline erosion, any wave-related damage and coastal flooding, public infrastructure. So we want to really avoid any of the damage that could be caused by any sort of restoration type project. Minimize the impacts to flood risk management, and minimize vulnerability of coastal areas. So these are all important constraints of the study. So first up, we have the preliminary working alternatives, and you can see here that these were a number of alternative groups, which are groups of measures, which we'll get into, developed for each of these opportunity zones. So you can see here on the graph that there's 5 opportunity zones, and then some baseline scenarios were developed for this modeling. So those measures that were all based on the objectives are listed here in this column. You can see them all here. And then the 5 zones are across the top. So you can see where is a measure going to fit within each of the zones, opportunity zones. So specific here, you've got breakwater modifications are obviously applicable at the breakwater. So these were all measures that were included within the study. So next up, we have wave modeling, which was also conducted. Wave models done to determine the wave energy depth and substrate, assess the surface wave effects on infrastructure, and then ultimately the results of this modeling are input into the hydrodynamic modeling. We have a little graph at the end to show how all of these models plug into each other, so it'll help shed some of the light as we move through it. So the outputs of that wave modeling are plugged into this hydrodynamic model, which is basically a 3D visualization of where does the sediment travel and where does it flow to. And then the results of this model are plugged into the habitat evaluation model, so which is abbreviated here HEM. And HEM is a tool that determines the benefits of each measure. And these are really quantified as a habitat unit. So every output is expressed that way. And then the outputs from the habitat model are plugged into the cost-effective model. So you can see here the CEICA is really the cost-benefit type model. So, and this whole thing is developed by a number of subject matter experts. So we're getting to the point where all of this gets compiled with the cost estimates for each of those measures and plugged into that cost-effective model. And that cost-effective model basically spits out the best buy plan, or best bang for the buck, if you will. So that's where we're at. That's the progress that we've had to date. And now the next steps are to take those best buy plans, and we're going to include between 3 and 5 Best Buy plans as determined through the various modeling efforts that we just walked through, and as well as requests from us, the city, to include locally preferred alternatives. And those alternatives are going to meet the project objectives, including options for possible breakwater modifications. So that final array of those between 3 and 5 Best Buy plans will all be summed up within this draft report. And that draft report is what I had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that will be released towards the end of this year. So the draft report will include not only all those alternatives, but also the draft environmental impact statement and the draft EIR. So, and then, as noted, it's going to include all the supporting documents for all of the modeling efforts that have been underway thus far. And that'll be released. And then so the public outreach and comment, this is where we could really use everybody's help, whatever your your standpoint or whatever your thoughts are. This is really the point in time where we could use everybody to review that draft, comment on it, take a look at, thumb through the appendices, and provide all those comments. And we'll make it real clear. There'll be a public outreach ahead of time. We'll have a meeting to release that draft.
The modeling is essentially complete. And so there are several array of alternatives that can be included, 3 to 5. So if we do 3, then that means that 2 are not. If we do 5, then 2 more than 3. And so the city is asking the Corps to make sure that potentially 2 out of those 5 arrays that are studied as part of the EIR does include a breakwater modification. But the final array of alternatives that's studied as part of that EIR, that has not been defined yet.
So 2 out of the 5 alternatives presented ultimately will study breakwater modification only 2 out of the 5? Should it be more?
More
options, but it's 2.
Sure. So I think I can't definitively answer that question for you today because we're here because this is the Army Corps' annual meeting and we absolutely want to be here. But we're also in the middle of determining which array of alternatives to include in that final array that's studied in the EIR. And some of them include a breakwater modification and some of them don't. What the city is asking for is that as part of this EIR process, there is at least 2 that do consider a breakwater.
I hope we need more than 2. To me, just planting eelgrass doesn't cut it.
Definitely fair.
Thank you both for...
Well, how many of those options will include bringing waves back to the Long Beach beach? Because right now we have to go to a whole nother city in order for my kids to play in the waves at any capacity. So how many of those options would include the possibility of waves at the beach?
That's a great question, and again, not one that we can answer today. That will definitely be defined as we move forward with the EIR, and at the end of the year, hopefully, we'll have a better idea of what that looks like and what the different alternatives allow for the city to benefit from.
Thank you both for being here. I think what I'm concerned with, and I think I hear this from a lot of people, is we're wondering, originally the Surfrider's intent, and I think Long Beach was to see the effects the breakwater would create. And the environment that was here was a sandy bottom and a wetland. And what we're wondering is why it's gone to the eelgrass and the kelp, which is in PV, when that really is not about this environment. And we would like to know, I think we would like it to focus on the breakwater and how that will affect the Long Beach breakwater and the surrounding area, and not all these other things that can completely change it or negate it or eliminate what we really want to deal with.
Sure. So as many of you probably know, the Long Beach breakwater. The Long Beach breakwater is a federal asset. So anything that we might want to do with the Long Beach breakwater would need the Army Corps' involvement. And the Army Corps is a federal agency, and so they have a process that they follow nationally.
Is that why the environmental impact report was expanded?
That is why while the study may have begun as a breakwater study, it has since evolved to become the East San Pedro Bay Ecosystem Restoration Study, because the Corps doesn't study breakwaters. They have several missions, and one of them is ecosystem restoration.
And with all due respect, the breakwater is what changed this environment, and that's why it needs to be the focus. Doesn't that make sense? I'm not a scientist.
Thank you for the feedback.
So, one point, can't call it restoration if it wasn't there before. That's a big issue right now, all these restoration efforts that we're having. We're having people create whole new ecosystems, digging deep holes, it's just a point to keep in mind. You might want to call it restoration, but if it wasn't there before, it's a whole new ecosystem to create.
It's another change, not restoring.
That's right.
So what was said earlier, that when we release our draft report that will contain the recommendation, that is where we would want to hear from you with your comments and your suggestions and recommendations, whether or not we have hit the target or whether or not we need to make some recommendation or changes so that we could deliver the project that is supportable locally. But I just want to remind everyone that the project, as you saw earlier, our authority is aquatic ecosystem restoration. So the measures that we develop and the combination of those measures, they have to produce aquatic ecosystem outputs. Now, one of the measures, the features that we have is breakwater modification. So we're going through the analysis right now of whether modifying the breakwater is warranted to produce aquatic ecosystem restoration measures. And that would be one of those analysis that will have the results that you will see as part of our draft IFR that you will get to review.
When you say restoration, are you talking about the way that it used to be before the breakwater went in, or a different type of ecosystem that wasn't there before?
Yeah, so you're looking at exactly the sort of habitat that our target for restoration.
Were those things there before? Were they there? Do we have oyster beds?
So we have, these are the things that are found within the area.
But not the breakwater.
Say that again.
They're found within the study area, but not the breakwater area, some of those areas.
That's correct. But we are studying the area. We are not studying the breakwater. The breakwater is a feature that could provide aquatic ecosystem restoration outputs.
But that's the breakwater was the whole reason this thing got studied. And one of the environmental factors, one of the ecosystems that you're not... the breakwater was the whole reason the study got started. And now it's possible that it's eliminated. And one of the environments that's not being looked at is wave restoration, which affects everything else.
So,
Yeah, he's had his hand up for a while. We're having we can have that.
on your first slide, you showed the goals and objectives for the project. You said that the goal was ecosystem restoration. Sitting in this room, I'm listening to a lot of people, they would like to have beachfront restoration. So, since this project was begun as a community initiative and included beachfront restoration, wave action, cleansing of the bay as primary objectives, I wonder how that got lost in the translation to this goal, which is only part of what the original goals and objectives for this project were.
That's my question as well. It's the crux of the matter here. Yeah. We would like to see that be the focus.
Be part of it.
Great. I think we've had a lot of great questions tonight. Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Great questions and comments. I also think that the study is ongoing. I know that Joshua and his team, Monica is in the audience as well, working on this daily with the Army Corps of Engineers, and then the city has a number of consultants on board as well, who are all trying to help the city meet our shared objectives with the Corps, which is ecosystem restoration, but the city's also been very clear from the beginning that water quality improvements are also very important to us. If we're able to find incidental benefits as a part of the study, then that would also be fantastic. And through it all, we do need to protect existing infrastructure and operations in the East San Pedro Bay. So I know that's a really complicated, a lot of really complicated components to throw into one. We're in the middle of it right now, and when that EIR is presented to you, the information will be a lot more synthesized in a way that you can hopefully understand better than we could possibly explain to you now, since we are in actually the process of synthesizing that and developing the final array of alternatives to include in that EIR that you'll see hopefully at the end of the year. So we'll take maybe 2 more questions, but I also wanted to just reframe the conversation that I know there are a number of really great ideas and thoughts in this room. All of them I encourage you to express as written comments to the EIR, but please also understand that we are still in the process of synthesizing all of that data that we've been analyzing over the past year and a half.
Yeah. Will somebody in the city have the courage to stand up and say that the surfing days of yesteryear within Long Beach will never, ever, ever, ever return?
Last question.
Who want to vote?
Will the incidental benefits of breakwater removal, will those be included in the cost benefit analysis?
Ample places to surf.
The community benefits, the health benefits, will those be somehow quantified?
Those have been considered all the way through the different modeling efforts that Josh described and synthesized in a manner that we can all better understand as part of that EIR. All right, thank you for having us.
Your comment when the report comes out is that the goal and objective has to be expanded to be able to...
Well, I would say not expanded, but restored to what was originally here. It's already been expanded way beyond its scope. It needs to be brought back.
So you have to look at it from the context of our authority, within the rubric of our authority, and that is aquatic ecosystem restoration. What you're asking is more recreation?
No, waves are an ecosystem. Waves create an ecosystem.
I completely agree with that. But if right now what we have identified as our goal and our objective does not include waves.
And it should, because they were here before. It's not restoration.
But the point is that when we went out to the public to describe our goal and objective, we used that for our planning.
Waves were in there the last meeting when we were that meeting at Cherry Park. Waves were there, and we spoke. We wanted that.
So when the report comes out, you will see the sort of one formulation that happened, the analysis that we have, and the decision that has been made to get to this point. That's when that would be appropriate for you.
You take trying to get the who. That's all.
Yeah. Oh, the PDT is going to recommend the district engineer supports the recommendation. Together with the city, it will be recommended to higher headquarters in Washington.
So the city will have a role in whether the breakwater will be among the final. When I want to get that question answered.
To clarify, this is important. So the city certifies the EIR. That is the city's...
I'm not at the EIR level. I want my question answered on whether the breakwater will be among the 2 runoff options that will be studied. You were telling me that certain staff at the Corps of Engineers will decide that, and you indicated the city would be part of that recommendation?
Well, the city is part of our plan development right now, but we're not at the point where we can tell you whether...
No, I understand, but you're going to recommend something with the city's input to the district director or
To answer your question,
Yes.
This is an Army Corps study. We follow the Army Corps process. The city is the local sponsor. We've been very clear throughout that we're interested in ecosystem restoration, water quality improvements, and incidental benefits, which could include breakwater modifications.
Right.
And so as part of developing and agreeing on this final array of alternatives to include in the EIR, the Corps gets to make the final decision. The city has input, but the Corps makes the final decision.
So the city will have input, but that be city staff or the city council or both?
City staff.
City staff.
The city council has already shared with us that they are interested in exploring and studying the potential impacts of water
that recommendation goes to Washington? Or
It will be
maybe...
part, yes. Our report will be submitted to our headquarters in Washington,
Yes.
which will endorse it, and then they will release it for national review
Okay.
before a decision is made whether it's recommended to Congress.